Greetings.
What up?
Hey, how you doing?
The meeting's now live.
Okay, all right, so. I will call this meeting to order, Budget and Finance Committee meeting. As previously called. I see Alderman Lennon, Alderman Nowak here, and we're joined by Finance Director Ben Bache, City Administrator Ruth Samba Green. And with that, I will open it up to public comment. Hearing none, seeing none, we will move to the first agenda item, which was the, remind me here.
This is the general fund, the combination, the general fund and the Berwyn securitization fund projected 2020 and 2021 through 2024 budget.
Okay, all righty. And with that, I'll turn it over to Director Dash.
Okay, after an extensive process where we went talk to our various department heads to get their input, following the budget committee's guidance as to how to mitigate, what's best to mitigate the impact of COVID and planning for the 2021 budget, we were able to produce this draft that lays out in summary and in detail what we're projecting early in the process. We're here in the beginning of November. As we review these numbers, just realize that this is our best attempt to go into our crystal ball and predict the next 4 years.
Mhm.
So.
Quick question, Ben.
Yes.
For any aldermen that are watching tonight's meeting, this draft, are they gonna be getting it in their council packets, or when is it gonna be shared with them? Because I'm sure they're gonna ask that question.
It's, normally we would include that in with the minutes, as we, now, of course, it's unrealistic for us to have it for Tuesday's session, obviously, you know, as we're compiling the notes and all that,
Mhm.
but sometime within the next 30 days, we'll expect to make this.
So, so
available.
this draft won't be in, obviously, tomorrow's agenda that's gonna be released?
Correct.
But it'll be in the following council agenda after
And,
that?
and it's important to note too, that what we're talking about here will also be the summary, the high level, results will be presented on the Tuesday committee of the whole meeting. What time is, that starts at 7 p.m.
Next week?
In 3 weeks?
No, this Tuesday.
Next week.
I'm not sure, that hasn't been released yet.
No.
The Tuesday, we're gonna present the property tax levy options. My point is that we're going to present summary, general fund results to assist to assist council in making a determination on the best possible tax levy. That's our normal process, and
Okay.
is presenting summary results 2020 as well as what we project from a high level standpoint.
So the summary results will be in the presentation on Tuesday.
Correct.
So this will be on. the-
Yes,
Yeah,
I think that covers.
yeah, cause that's part of your presentation,
Yeah.
so that, you know, it's not being held up by procedure of
Yeah.
minutes having to be submitted.
Correct.
So to answer your
Yeah.
question,
Yeah.
they will have it, right?
Mhm.
Okay, awesome, even better. Cool.
So, when we're looking at these summary projections, the biggest thing that points to mind is the 2020, well, one of the biggest is the COVID impact on 2020's budget. And back in August, when we attempted to determine what the impact was, we had not had a chance to, we weren't able to access data from the summer months. We were only able to determine the first 4 months of the year in the height of the shutdown, what we thought the revenues, expenses, and the net change would be. It just so happens that the revenue impact was not as, so far as we see the returns coming in, is not as severe as we had feared back in August thus far. Now, of course, a lot can change in the next couple months.
Sure.
But it gave us a sense that instead of the $5.4 million change that we had talked about back in at the end of August, we are, that net, loss is at a little over $2.5 million. And the following pages is going to provide a pretty good summary of what that's based on. And the first page is the revenue losses, as well as, believe it or not, we've had some better than expected results also. The amounts shaded in green are the better than expected results, and obviously the amounts shaded in, in red and shaded in a lighter red indicate the revenue areas that have suffered thus far this year. The point is, three of our biggest categories, property taxes, that was not impacted. We have our transactions posted through October, and we are within a couple $100,000 of our property tax budget. Also, the state incomes, state local use taxes actually came in better than expected. The state sales and home rules tax are projected to be lower, but by a significant amount less of a severe impact. And of course, our businesses were closed for 2 months, so that explains close to, those two categories amounted to close to $900,000 in losses. We had feared that number was going to be far more severe.
Sure.
But the transactions that have come in during the summer months has given us a sense that it's not, that area is not going to be as bad as expected. However, with that being said, we also have the areas that were impacted with the city. First was the fines and the parking tickets. With the reality of COVID, the city, we did not enforce parking tickets, issuing the parking tickets where everybody was in shelter in place and at home. And in addition, the red light photo enforcements were projecting to be $400,000 less than the budget. And obviously, that's, as we talked about previously, that's due to less people driving and so forth. But needless to say, we're comfortable at this point in projecting the loss in revenues to be $3.8 million, when we thought it was going to be more like $7 million back in, 6 to 7 million back in.
Yeah,
August.
5.8.
Yeah, something like that,
Right.
plus.
Yep.
So, quick question then, so these variances in the red, we're attributing them to COVID. In past years, these variances wouldn't have been this extreme.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yep. Okay.
Good.
Um,
I can see that.
The next page illustrates the expense categories that the city was able to manage, and also just by attrition, as far as the reality of certain of our city services being closed to the public due to the COVID situation, and as such, the city was able to have expense reduction overall of $1.3 million. These categories listed make up the majority of those. The only areas that were actually higher than normal had to do with IT upgrades, but as IT Director Jim Frank had explained, there was other areas of his budget that came in lower than that.
So he took it over.
Yep. And as you can see, we do have the line item, the COVID-19 expenditure. Thus far, we're anticipating, so far, these are expenses posted, and that's $190,000. We do anticipate, I'm estimating somewhere around $200,000 to $300,000 more in COVID expenditures due to protective PPE as well as disinfectants. That's going to be submitted to FEMA for reimbursement. With that being said, though, if you flip back to the second page, where it's listed, we are expecting a reimbursement of at least $800,000 from the county. The communication has been positive with the county. From what we understand, other municipalities have been able to collect their allocations, and we have provided every thing that they've needed. So we're hoping that we have some relief shortly. I have to compliment our staff, all of our staff, as well as Ruth's guidance and everybody's support is a very lengthy and intense project, gathering the information to present to the county as well as FEMA, and it's ongoing.
So these expenses and these revenues represent all of the expenses and revenues. That's the summary of the general fund.
Correct.
Okay, excellent.
So again, behind that is the detail. And this is the detail to all of this are the things that we've talked about in meetings with our department heads. By all means, as you review the details, feel free to.
This is across all departments.
Yes.
And as discussed in the past committee meetings leading up to this point, it's all summarized here, all the departments.
And did some of those departments change, the ones we asked to change some of their revenue projections? Did they go back and change some of those through, like last week we had, or the last?
Scott, that is correct. I
Okay.
went in.
Okay.
You know, it is possible. I mean, if you guys should see something that maybe
Okay.
we might have, but yes,
Okay,
we did review.
we can review it then.
Yeah.
If we see anything, then we can
Yeah.
reach out. That's good.
You know, the new item that you see in the detail, though, is based on where the reporting is from year to date, that the area shaded in yellow.
Mhm.
It just evaluating where the transactions are being posted up until sometime around October, as well as reviewing historic trends and recent months' activities. We went line by line to take our best stab at what we feel the appropriate projection would be for 2020.
Now, Ben, good question.
Sure.
Before you do your presentation on Tuesday,
Mhm.
I'm looking through all the budget items right here. Previously, when we've been going over items, you had a right-hand column that gave us like a little description. So like for salaries, if it was like union, you'd put this percentage is due to union. Could you add that in also, because there's gonna be other aldermen who have not seen any of these?
Sure.
And that way, it would probably save you from having to answer lots of questions when they could just view it themselves in that column.
Sure.
Even if it's a 8 by 14 page spread out or something. So
Yeah.
we can add that to it, because I think that'll help. I mean,
Just
we've
to
been here,
simplify
but
them.
we haven't had any really other,
Yeah.
older people here.
Yeah,
Or me,
but by
so.
your providing that in
Yeah.
previous meetings,
The
it's
basis
been
of-
extremely helpful.
Yeah, the basis
Um,
of projection, and the only thing I might do if you all are okay with this is, in order for it to be easier to read, I'll have to take out the 2018 amount. In order to, unless you guys wanna get out your magnifying glasses and being
Yeah,
able
whatever
to.
you need to do. I mean,
Yeah.
just so it's there, I think it's really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, just to make it legible, because of
Mhm.
course, even though I printed it on landscape,
Yeah.
it's not as easy to read, but I'll do my best to
Okay.
have everything in there.
I just
Absolutely.
figure it'll save you
Yeah.
lots of headaches having to answer questions if it's just right there, easy for them to.
Yep, will
to
do.
view.
Will do. Include parameters for projection. Basis. Projections, okay. Yes.
Hold on, let me just, so, I think for our benefit here, we've been following along for weeks.
Yeah.
And then we're presenting to Alderman Tuesday. So, let's just go over that one more time. Is there any departmental breakdown then, or, cause I know there's, if it were myself, I mean, police, fire were the biggest budgets. So, so let's just go over that one more time if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you wanna get into like the bigger departments and look at their.
Not necessarily here, but I think for for Tuesday.
Like do a breakdown.
How are we
like,
presenting?
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's just go over that one more time, just so that I understand it.
Can we do a breakdown like this and just separate it by,
The three biggest expenditures.
basically?
Three biggest departments, police, fire, public works.
Yeah.
And what does that represent, 75% of our budget?
Pretty close, 60 to 70%.
Okay.
Okay,
That might help.
Yeah.
that might help,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think,
Does this include everything right now though, right?
Correct.
Because I see the fire on page 9.
Yeah.
Fire?
Yeah,
Oh,
fire's on
okay.
page 9, so every
Yeah.
single department is here,
Yeah.
including the previous ones that you hadn't seen, because I did the city
Yeah.
admin, I went over with him, the mayor's, the legal.
Yeah.
So this includes everything, including those. So basically, I think it just by him adding that one little column at the end should be suffice, in my opinion, because, I mean, the breakdown is here on everything.
Okay.
I think people wanna see a whole picture,
uh-huh,
and then
Yeah.
anything,
Instead of.
you just tell
other-
people, fire department,
yeah.
page 9, in case anyone's
Yeah.
interested.
That might
Yeah.
work. Like an index.
What I'm not seeing on the last page, page 18, is basically what I'm looking at on any other page, 2018 actual amount and 2019 actual amount. So if you look at the sum of any budget, 18 and 19, you have a really good comparison, because that's how I think that's how we've been following along in these meetings, is what was 18 and specifically what is 19. That's the real context of what we're looking at. So I don't see it on page 18, so could you?
Actually,
Or where is
actually, it's there.
Uh-huh.
The thing is that on 17 and 18,
Uh-huh,
this is the Berwyn Securitization Corporation.
uh-huh.
And that is the fund that captures the sales taxes, as well as the state income and local taxes. There's no activity in 2018.
Oh,
There wasn't.
Right.
That section
Right.
that you were looking under.
Oh, on the last page.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Berwyn.
Correct.
okay, okay, so it'd be on page 17 then, is the summary that we're looking at.
Correct.
So 2020, so then the revenues 54 and then 56
Yep.
for the 2020 draft
Mhm.
budget. Just help me tie the numbers to it.
So with our 2020 projection, that's
Uh-huh.
where, our summary sheet is pulling the totals right at the last page. And as you can see
Yeah,
that,
54, yeah.
yeah,
Right, but what I'm referring to is the 18 and 19 actual amounts.
oh, okay,
Yeah,
no,
so
that's
it-
cool.
yeah.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, so that's the
Yeah.
way I've been following
To combine,
and
gotcha.
putting it in
Gotcha.
context, is
Gotcha.
looking at 18 and 19 actuals,
Yeah.
because that's probably more of an indicator of what is quote unquote expected or normal.
Yeah, that's not a
Right.
problem.
Thank you.
We'll put that in.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Got that. Gotcha. Okay. Okay, and of course, reviewing all this, the thing I wanted to explain about the property tax levies, we've laid out the four options that are appropriate for the city council to consider. The important thing is that we can talk about each of the four options. The property tax option that we have in our 2021 budget, that is based on option A, which is no change in the levy overall. And I'll go through, we have the 2019 levy that totals a little $33.3 million. The first option that we're considering is that we don't change that amount at all. And that is the option that's presented in the draft of the budget.
Uh-huh, in the
Do
yellow.
you have an extra page?
Yep.
Okay.
With
No, no.
Sorry about that, there you go.
I can share. Okay.
So with that being said though, we have experienced an increase in pension normal cost between the police and fire pension fund. And that sums to a little under $250,000. if we have no change to the overall tax levy, the general fund is going to have to absorb that increase in normal costs. So just bear in mind, if the city council or aldermen decide to vote no change, then the general fund is gonna be in a loss for that amount. Now, base option B, we add to the levy the increases in the normal cost for police and fire. So then it's more or less, for the general fund standpoint, a break-even amount, but at least it's not at a loss.
Sure.
Overall. Option C is the bond covenant. We have, as far as when we issued our bonds for pension fund and past bond issues, we had presented in our operating statement and explanations that we were going to levy about $500,000 each year for that. And of course, that increase is not included in our budget draft either. And of course, what these options also provide is the average taxpayer impact on a value of $180,000. So, option C, option B's impact, depending on the value of the property, $180,000 is $15 per taxpayer from the city of Berwyn standpoint. And then the bond covenant amounts to about $46 for the taxpayers. So that's bond option C. Then we have base option D, which, similar to last year, this was the option that was approved by council that considered the CPI, and we provided an increase based on that. It was somewhere around 800, total was amounted to $800,000.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now that amount is like $1.1 million. The impact to the taxpayer of $180,000 house home value would be around $70 a year. So the important thing is whatever is decided, once I perform the presentation, and it's important that you all take a straw poll and determine what area you're leaning toward, because at council you're going to have to select the part that we should draft as an ordinance. Now, of course, this still can be changed up until the vote, but procedural wise, we have 20 days after the determination to issue the levy.
Yeah,
So
okay.
Just being prepared that, it's important to do a straw poll after the presentation, make a selection, then that'll fulfill the requirements to allow us, because,
And then
we
at the
won't.
council meeting, then they would do the vote?
Correct.
Okay.
Just to avoid having it like Christmas, last year we did
Sure,
it like
sure.
close to Christmas Eve.
No, exactly. So last year, did we do option C last year?
We did the CPI option.
Oh, so we did full.
So there was the bond covenant, last year.
We did
had-
option D at $70,
Right.
or the equivalent thereof, yeah.
And it was a little
Right.
less than that last year. but-
Right, it was around $800,000 total. Thing with last year though, is that we did not have an increase in the normal cost. Well,
Sure,
this
sure.
year we did.
Okay.
For the pension fund, so.
Okay.
But, yeah, that's just to bear in mind.
Is that increase gonna be every year then, from here out,
As far as, this,
for the pension?
it's hard to say.
We
It
don't know.
really is hard to
Okay,
say.
okay.
It's, in the normal cost.
And what's that increase due to, the 249?
What happens is the actuaries take all the census of police and fire, sworn officers, firemen, and they make a determination of there's factors like demographics, mortality, what each of the membership is making rate-wise, and then they do the number crunching and they make a determination of what the normal cost should be in order to pay the liability, No, this is actually your current cost. They make a determination of what the current outflow should be.
For retirees, current retirees.
Correct.
But it increases every year due to,
It just depends on the configuration of those who retired.
It could.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said, with
Yeah.
that, it is.
Yep.
depending on the makeup of who's working, who's there,
Yep.
employee-wise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to thank you for moving us ahead this year compared with previous years on schedule. I think we're doing really well, getting everything forward, the
Mhm,
draft
mhm.
budget. Like you said last year, this tax levy wasn't until the very end of December, and now we're at the beginning of November. So that's I appreciate all your hard work, Ben. I know you put in quite a few weekends and evenings doing this, and it's definitely shown.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, thank you, Ben.
and
Thank
you've
you, Ben.
Yeah,
responded
thanks,
to
Ben.
all of us when we've needed something, added anything extra, including those little indexes, just to make life easier for the aldermen so that they can actually read the documents and understand them better without having to bother you too much, so.
I really
Thank you,
appreciate
Ben.
that.
No, it's been
and
an
all-
easier process this year, and this is
Yeah.
your second year basically
Yeah.
doing it on,
Yeah.
on your own, so it's been good.
And I do have to thank, you guys for your support, Ruth, for your guidance and support, as well as my staff. You really worked hard to get these transactions in, and I'm grateful for it.
Well, this has been a challenging year for everybody,
Yeah.
and that's the key. When we first started talking several months ago about the $7 million, and now we're down to a more realistic, we knew there was gonna be a loss, of where we were, just because in projections. But it looks better than we had.
And I have to say, it really is nice to have that reserve there, because imagine if we didn't. So,
Sure.
that was taken on when the mayor first came in, getting that reserve. I know we had a bond out for it, but when it comes to it,
Yeah.
no one was expecting COVID or this emergency, and that's what those funds are for this emergency.
Yep.
In fact, so it's nice to have a little leeway, so we're not as stressed onto
Mhm.
how are we gonna do something, because right now is not the time to start taxing our residents too much more, or going out there and raising all kinds of fines, because we understand that we're all hurting right now,
Yep.
so.
And just to add to what you're saying and lead into a very important issue that council's gonna have to vote on and approve, is our line of credit. We had talked about previously that we were working with BMO Harris to establish a line of credit for, as one alternative, if the impact was severe, for that to be in place. But the other important aspect of the line of credit is for our debt service. Specifically, there's two bond issues that are, because our fund balance is at a favorable level, we are scheduled to owe $3.8 million, and we planned on refunding that, as part of the budget process. But with this line of credit that we've established with Harrison, it's gonna be on a council agenda for, it'll allow the city to be able to draw on that to fund that payment in 2020, while it formulates a solution to fund this principal due, but there's another principal of $3 million that's due next year. So the line of credit gives the city the ability, at a very reasonable interest rate, somewhere between, I believe it's between 3% and 4%, I'll check, to allow the city to spread that out over 3 years. But it's the city's intention to look, especially with the interest rates and the market's very favorable, to look for a solution where we can refund both of those years. And with our ability to be able to absorb this loss with our fund balance, we can take advantage of the interest rates to refund these principal maturities due. And at more favorable rates than when the bond was first issued in 2010 and 2011. So as we present that, it's just real important that that's approved, and then of course for the purpose approving the draw on that, because the payment is due December 1st. Okay?
So for residents to understand, that's like refinancing your home.
Sure.
If you got the rates down, you go ahead and you refinance and you end up paying less, obviously.
Right, and in addition, because of our favorable position, unfortunately, the bonds are callable as a result of that. So this line of credit allows us that flexibility to be able to absorb that.
Okay.
So, I'll just ask a couple hard questions here. So we're looking at a projected deficit of 2.5 for this year,
Yes.
okay? And a projected deficit of 2.2 in '21.
Yes.
Which again is a lot, it's a bit of a relief, right? We were expecting and talking about a higher deficit.
Around
you know,
6.
Around 6, more than twice that. So, we would be presenting then for 2021, a balanced budget that will rely on one of two things, the levy and, the fund balance, right?
For 2021, yes, it would, there's,
That would be our balanced budget.
the revenue numbers that are projected into 2021 is that if we, like, where there's no property tax increase. And with that being said, with the other revenues being similar, in some ways to, the revenue's not changing far from the 2020 projection, then we are faced with this $2.3 million loss in 2021. And obviously, the circumstances with COVID-19 have contributed to that reality.
So, everybody's expecting COVID to somehow at least be under control somewhat, and who knows if that's gonna happen, second quarter, third quarter, right? So 22, 23, and 24, we see that net change going up.
Yes.
And I know they're just projections, and again, what's the reason for them going up so that in '24 it's double than what it would be projected in '21?
Flat revenues.
Flat revenues.
Flat revenues.
Flat revenues and increasing expenses, or, flat revenues and increasing expenses pretty much due to just
Yep.
CPI, 2%, CBAs, right?
Correct,
Okay.
absolutely. Yep.
And then this is taking into account, doesn't take into account any kind of tax increases.
Correct.
It's just until we get to that point.
Correct.
Okay, so then what does the fund balance decrease from 16 to 13 to 9 to 4 do? What are the effects of that in terms of our credit rating, and, are we paying then higher interest?
You're correct, those.
And that's accounted for in here?
Yes, the rating agencies have they understand that the revenues and expenses are gonna be impacted through 2021. It's beyond that if, that we could be that is possible to be subject to a rating adjustment if we continue the course 2022 through 2024.
Okay, so then what do we do when our fund balance is negative, or where does that money come from?
Well, the fund balance being negative, it's the onus is on the city to work toward balanced budget in that regard.
Yeah.
But, I can't,
You can include measures that haven't been approved by city council.
Correct,
Yeah,
correct.
so this is just assuming status quo, everything the way.
Yep.
Okay. And then the other point was just with the levy, the 250, the option A, just to do the bare minimum. Or actually, the bare minimum, but option A, option B, so that 250 in terms of the already, further revised expenses from the budget, is there 250 in the 59,239? Is there $250,000 that can be taken out here?
You mean as far as absorbed in another revenue category?
Yes, or across several revenue categories. There isn't one single revenue category that I think I would wanna point out or say, take it out of that one, but I think across the entire budget of $59 million.
Yeah.
Is
So-
that a possibility?
So what you're getting at is, with the 2021, this net change right here, that would be if we just didn't do anything, correct, when it comes to this tax levy?
Yep.
So basically, if we do the tax levy and we go ahead and we take to option D,
Yep.
that, 1 million, that would offset at least that net change.
That's correct.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, so those will all change.
So for instance, your option D,
Mhm.
as you see the previous increase from the prior year, that would be 1,140,309. That's if you went with the CPI.
Yep.
So that one, if you go ahead and just take that number off of the 2021 change of that negative 2,077,000, then basically we would still be running
122.
low, but it would definitely help that number right there.
Yep.
So this number doesn't take into account any tax levy whatsoever. So whatever you decide on Tuesday as a council is gonna help project the course of action and how great the deficit will be.
It's a $500,000 each year in 22 and beyond. That would decrease this net change, right?
Correct.
Is that what we're saying?
That would decrease the impact. The other issue though, that we have to be mindful though, is that if we keep the same levy though, the bondholders are also not gonna react, because part of the covenant is for the city to raise the income taxes to fund the debt service payment, $500,000 a year. We're not projecting that into 2021 also, so.
So those are things we can look at.
Right, this 1.1 in option D takes in consideration that $500,000 increase as well as the CPI.
So we could look at other ways to raise revenue besides property taxes.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so the safe
Maybe.
bet for, moving forward would be maybe the option D just for this year, just to see how we go, and then we'd have to further look at where the year goes and how we can change those revenues more than anything. But that would give us like that little buffer, is what I'm
Yeah.
assuming, is that what that is?
And it certainly helped us this year. I mean, having the CPI
Yeah.
levy, helped cushion the impact, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I guess my question was, maybe I didn't ask it properly, was, if we go with option, I don't know if it's another option, but if we go with option A, right, we're absorbing this 249. Option A increases our 2.2, does it increase it by $250,000? Or is that already accounted for?
It's already built in to.
Okay, so if we do nothing, this is our deficit?
Correct.
Okay, this is our deficit.
And then if we go B or C or whatever, then
It'll mitigate.
And
Yeah.
obviously, like we know, it'd be great if we could keep that fund balance of 16% minimum, just.
How do we do that then? Well, how do we do that realistically?
Well, this year we
You
can,
know?
this year we
No.
can obviously draw for it for that 2020.
Yeah.
And we're still left, as you see on the bottom, the positive, that 350.
Yeah.
So that right there, so that's at the end of this year, that's
Right.
just to cover our expenses, the COVID expenses from this year. So that's why it's there, it's there for
So
emergencies
we're
like
taking
COVID.
$3 million this year.
That 2,541,000, right?
Now,
Yeah, that's in the deficit.
Now, the option that's also available to mitigate in the next 2 to 3 years is our line of credit.
Yeah.
We're just utilizing that to restructure these callable bonds. However, if God forbid we run into another disaster, at least we have that line of credit over the next 2 or 3 years to help mitigate the damage. Because then that allows you to spread that loss out over, maybe 2 to 3 years.
It just seems like in 23 and 24, we're gonna be looking at options that are gonna be a lot steeper than what
Yes,
we're looking
yes.
at here.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I know that the department heads have done a great job of reducing
Yeah.
expenses. But, I know we had some pretty drastic recommendations there that I think, I don't know, again, if it's not in 2020, then, they're not popular, and nobody likes to talk about them, and, there might be one person out of the 8 that's gonna talk about them, but I don't know if they've been even considered, or if they're just off the table.
And
And that's why we're talking, that's why we see this increasing. And again, this doesn't seem sustainable, and I know I'm not putting that back on the finance department at all, or really any one department in particular, but it's just, maybe we didn't make our expense reductions drastic enough. I don't know. That's what I would, if I'm the lone person on city council that thinks that, so be it, but I think maybe we didn't do that. And we're starting to see it. I don't know
Well,
how
we're
sustainable that is.
gonna have to do it sooner or later, because when you get
So-
to the 2023-24,
So-
it's gonna be more of an issue
So
than.
why not start some of it now, it's painful, I know it is, but I don't know, and
Well, that's when,
what does that look like, honestly?
yeah, the department heads literally.
You can only raise taxes so much.
Yeah,
Yep.
and that's when the department heads need to hear from council. What
Mhm.
services do you wanna get rid of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. I mean,
Yeah, well, we had our recommendations, and,
Yeah.
some of them were, and I think, it's, I don't think it should just be a one-sided conversation or one-sided directive to department heads, it's, cause, we only know our side, our perspective, we're not the department heads, we're not doing it every single day. And then I'll admit, I put some pretty drastic things out there that, people probably maybe just shrugged off and said, okay, yeah, that's not gonna happen, but again, they haven't even been considered. And they're there, so those were recommendations.
Yeah.
And again, maybe it's not realistic, and, somebody needs to
And-
maybe go through each one and say, this isn't realistic, it's never gonna happen, but I feel like they're not even being,
I think the
considered.
important thing to realize as we're looking at 22 through 23 though, there's a lot of moving targets though.
Yeah.
I mean, sales taxes, state income taxes, the volume of activities, well, it's possible that those could possibly come in better than expected to, just like we experienced over the last two or three months with the recovery, so it's important that
And that's fair.
we don't
That's fair.
make the assumption that.
They're assuming flat revenues.
Right.
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 we can hope
Which
that
may
cannabis
not-
will help us out once it finally gets here.
Which probably is not gonna happen, flat revenues, but again,
Yeah,
I think we're just, I feel like we're not looking at every single aspect of it. This committee is just one part of the
Yeah.
government here, and, I don't think that we have the authority or the knowledge to make all of those kinds of recommendations. So again, I guess my point is, maybe there's some tougher considerations that need to be looked at.
And that's where we rely on department heads or departments to come to us, and we don't manage the departments on a day-to-day basis, so if there are ideas of revenue increases or grants or whatever, or decreases that they see they could do that can help us with this in the next, 1, 2, 3, 4 years, it would help us out too, because we're, like I said, we don't manage it day to day. We have to, worry about our residents and the impact on them, but also worry about, services as well, so.
And I think I've always said this, it's easier for us as the aldermen to say to a resident or to our residents collectively, you know what, we're going with option, whatever it is, we're going with option D or option E, a higher levy. But I always think this should be one part of two other measures. One is, you know what, levy, I'm sorry, we have to raise it. And it's painful, but then it should also be painful on the expenses. I mean, what have we done that has really been equally painful here? What have we done? And, it speaks to the CBAs, and I know that's 75% of the budget, and it's set, and, it's not even, we're trying to make this with 25% of the budget, and we're never gonna get there.
Yeah.
And, we don't have that, we don't negotiate that, and, we're not part of that, so.
I think the departments have heard your call, like in the last year, if you take a look at page 2, that whole paramedic collections, that was started within the last year, and that's them finding new extra revenue.
Yeah.
And not at expense of our residents, because that's just extra dollars that they're able to collect through a program through the state.
And I think
So
that's our
there-
expectation for every department to look
So,
at.
I
We know we
mean-
have departments that are not revenue generating, but we do have departments that are revenue generating.
Correct.
And that's where we need to look at, for them, what are their ideas to come to us? Or things that change, if it's, moving an employee from one area to another, or whatever it may be,
Yeah.
But,
And this
and that's
past
great,
year-
but that's within that 25% that we're, I don't wanna say playing with, but that
Mhm.
we're working with, but what about the other 75%?
And then also one of the.
That's off limits for some reason.
One of the things that we also heard during these budget meetings is that they are doing restructure of staffing at the PD, which is
Mhm.
gonna save at least $100,000 this year. So, I mean, I'm really curious to see how all this is gonna be coming into play over the next few years, because they've been talking, they're doing updates, to different software programs that'll help with tracking.
Mhm.
So by making these investments right now, hopefully that's actually gonna come to fruition so we can actually see some good numbers to see where they can make those hard changes. So, I mean, they're taking the baby steps
Sure.
right now. They did do a big step just by this restaffing, and I'm really curious to see how it's gonna work out at the end of the year. And I really wanna see that data, but they really can't make those big decisions till they get that data. So I'm really curious to see what they can do with it and to see how they can improve services. And just by making things more streamlined, less wasted time,
Right.
which would improve services and cost down on the labor costs also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
And that's not even being considered as we look at this overall map.
so that's one thing I'm looking forward to see how it's gonna affect when it comes to that 2022,
Yeah.
that 21-22 at the very end of next year, where that goes with it. And then, you know, even with the ticketing, how they're doing it with the new software, so they can like streamline that more. So that would definitely help with the revenue. And so I think they're starting to, what's nice is this year, our department heads are really making those smaller steps,
Yeah.
just to see how they can do things, just to run more effectively, because that way we are not so apt to say, I'm gonna start cutting this service, which, you know, our
Yeah.
residents really, for me as a resident here of Berwyn, I love to feel safe. And I hate to find out that, you know, dollars are being cut where I find are important as a resident. So it's nice, I'm really curious to see how all these changes are
Sure.
gonna happen
Mhm.
to affect that 2022. But I just don't wanna
So-
say that our departments aren't doing anything right now.
Yeah, and I'm
Cause
not,
they,
and I'm not
cause they
saying
are.
either.
No, and they've
Right.
heard you,
I'm not
and
saying
they've
either.
heard you, and I've
Yeah.
stressed your
Yeah.
message also, you know, but,
Yeah, so, and I think, you know, maybe it's looking at it, you know, I think for me, if there was an unpopular bullet point on our recommendations, hey, finance committee, this bullet point, maybe it would save some money, but for some reason or another, here's our reasons, not gonna happen, not
Mhm.
feasible. And those are the tough ones, you know, which CBAs are up and when? They're up in a couple of years, in a few months, right?
we have one coming up at the end of the year, I
Yeah,
believe.
and then, you know, then there's CBAs within here. So, I mean,
Mhm.
again, I'm gonna just put on the table, guys, I'm not, y'all know I'm not running for reelection. I'm not gonna be here, so maybe you could, maybe my message can be just, you know, let it go away, and then in 22, and 23, and 24, whatever happens, but, you know, for what it's worth, that's where the solution lies, partly to address some of this, and I'll just leave it at that, you know.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so, other than that, any new business, or, actually, before I go to new business, any other comments on this?
No, I'm not.
No? Okay, any new business? Okay, all right, well then I will, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay,
Thank
meeting
you.
adjourned, thank you.
Let me text Jim right now that we are done.
My printer went nuts. Not doing a
What are you
very good
doing?
job
You're wasting
clustering.
your-
Funny,
I'm like,
movies,
"Oh,
they
this
were
is
kind
good."
of out when you're in a movie.
Yeah.
So, were you trying to hit cancel on the printer, and you were
Yeah.
like, cancel, cancel?
Felt like that scene in Office Space. Yeah.
Well, be safe on your bike.
Yes, I know, I'm
You guys
running.
know that it's a lot darker, a lot
Dark
thinner.
at 5.
Yeah, you got all your reflective gear or whatever.
I have lights on there.
You have the lights on your shoes, right?
Yeah, when I walk, you know, those.
Grills? Is that Ked's?